Hello guys, that stupid rooster. Hello guys, welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be working on this carburetor. I picked this up at a local auction and I saw the Ford part number on the choke horn and I had to pick it up. So in this video I'm going to be showing you guys all the steps that I would usually go through to make this carburetor running again. Let's go ahead and get into it. First, I want to start off with what I do know about it and also why I bought it. So this isn't your just average Holley 4-barrel. And if some of you guys are really perceptive here, you would have seen this here fuel line and the auto light tag on the side. So this actually is a C80F 4-barrel carburetor. That is why I bought it. I saw the C80F stamped on the choke horn and I was like, I gotta get it. But I don't really know anything else about the condition of the carburetor, and that's why in this video we're going to be taking it apart, cleaning all the parts, seeing what needs to be replaced, seeing what needs to be maybe rebushed, and put it back together and see how it runs. So let's go ahead and take this thing apart one step at a time. I'll show you guys how I do it. Alright, so the first step to taking this thing apart would be to loosen this fuel rail off of it, which it would appear that someone already did. Loosen this side for me. Let's see, someone just about rounded that one off. Hopefully we don't have the same ill luck. Okay, yeah, so someone did the hard work for us here. These are usually a 7/16 wrench. I'm not going to say it's going to be that way for every single Holley you ever meet, but this one here is 7/16. Alright, so the next step I would do is go and take this bowl off. I guess we'll start with the primary side. That's usually a better place to start with. One nice thing about the guy I bought this from, I guess, he had a couple bolts and some nuts in here, and it's always a good thing to do with your Holley carburetors or any carburetor. Take you a bolt on the base plate and a couple nuts here, and you could even do it the other way around with just one bolt and one nut, but this guy chose to do it this way. And it holds the carburetor up off the ground, that way it doesn't bend any of the linkages by sitting flat, you know, because when it's on the intake manifold it doesn't actually have to sit completely flat. Anyway, what you need is a flathead screwdriver. Try and pick you one that has a little bit wider of a tip, especially with these older carburetors that you don't want to strip out these screws. That would be very inconvenient. And again, it looks like someone's already been here before and the screws are loose. So, and if your carburetor is full of gas, you're going to want to start at the bottom. That way it'll drain it out. What I would do if it's full of gas, you would take it at this one out here, stick you a cup or something in a rag to catch it, and pull it out, and it would drain it out. So usually a rattle can spray paint cap, that's usually enough to hold the fuel that's in the bowl. Make sure you guys keep your screws and stuff together. I will show you guys what screw goes where if we ever get to that point. It's a good idea to remember where you put your screws, but typically your fuel bowl screws are going to be pretty easily to identify. They're long and they also have a flathead there. Later on, more modern Holleys just have a nut or a regular bolt style instead of a flathead screwdriver. I much prefer the flathead screwdriver. That way all you need is a flathead screwdriver to take the bowl off. Anybody's got that. Any pocket knife has that. You know, it doesn't take a special tool to get that off. So another thing to note with this older Holley style here, they have these little arms that whenever you give her the beans, or I guess it shuts when you give her the beans, and whenever it goes back to idle, it opens this flap, and that's to vent excess fuel vapors from the bowl. And I think I like that design a lot. It keeps it helps against vapor locking for one. That way it can actually vent in the bowl. However, some people do say, it will leave fuel staining around this hole because fuel is escaping there, and it could leak whenever you're going around. But that's why whenever you give her the beans, it goes ahead and seals down. That way it doesn't spill out there for you. So I really think that's a pretty cool design, if you ask me. It's already starting to come apart for me, so that's cool. Oh my gosh. This is probably the original gasket, if I had to take a gander. That is like, yep, there we go. It's cardboard. You can see the way it's like shrunk over time. Well, that was probably the original gasket if I had to take a guess. Again, the bowl gasket completely fell apart. This has a code on it, 567. Say I don't know a whole lot about these carburetors, but looks like it backfired a couple times. We got some soot here in the ported vacuum slot there. So had a power valve in it. It was loose already. Let's see what size this guy was. It doesn't say at all, so probably a 6.5. Looks like someone may have put a kit in it at some point. I'm not for sure on that one. Holy cannoli. Wow, this thing only had 63 jets in it. 63s. That seems a little bit low. I currently have 72s in the primaries and the 800 in the Torino there. And it seems to like that pretty well. That's a very small jet. That's smaller than I thought it was going to be. So, on these older Holleys, the ported vacuum, the vacuum above the throttle blades, is actually located right here. So that's where you plug your distributor vacuum advance into if you're running ported vacuum advance. So, got our idle mixture screws here. We'll see how much. I would like to see how much these were turned out, so you can count your revolutions as you turn them back in. And then you'll probably want to replace the cork seals in these as well. But so this is right there. So 1, 2. Nope. No, that's about 1 1/4. I probably was running pretty good then. 1. Seated there. So 1 1/2. So yeah, I was actually probably running whenever this carburetor was put out of service. Again, we have crusty gasket, which again, not surprising, but interesting for sure. We got our float here. Nothing special to write home about that guy. We'll take these bolts apart here after a while, but I'm going to go ahead and take the secondaries apart. The accelerator pump diaphragm still moves, so that's interesting. I'm going to try and do a low buck rebuild. We're going to try and rebuild this for as cheap as possible. I'm trying to reuse as many of the parts as I can. I really don't feel like this had, obviously it had gas in it about like that most of its life, so the float height was set correctly, looks like. Let's go ahead and take the secondary bowl off. This one was loose, very loose, so someone's had this off recently for some reason. And I don't really know why. And the primary and secondary bowl screws are exactly the same, so if you mix those up, don't worry about it at all. Alright. So this is not a double pumper, so there's no accelerator pump on the secondary side, so we don't have to worry about that guy down there. I'll show you guys what it looks like. It seems like Holley usually uses, they use the same bowl front and back, so it has everything to be a double pumper, see? Except it is not drilled. You can see that hole in there is not drilled for accelerator pump. So more crusty gasket material. There's our secondary bowl. Oh no! So the float height was set way low. They're having problems with this guy, I guess. Interesting. Okay. That's nice. I don't have to scrape gaskets though. It all just crumbles right off. That's really nice. You really should dip these in some kind of chemical stuff to clean everything out, but I don't have that, nor am I going to. I'm probably not going to. I'm just going to use a couple cans of brake clean probably. And a toothbrush. Make sure every hole flows good. Any guesses on what these jets are going to be? 64s. So there's 63 up front, 64 out back. So again, no power valve in this guy because he was, this is basically the only circuit that is drilled out on this block is the main jet circuit. So that is very, very interesting for sure. But it's still tunable, which is nice. You can still tune it. More cardboard gasket. Again, it just falls right off, which is amazing. That way we're not scraping the surface. Alright. I would highly recommend using a Phillips screwdriver for this, but I'm too lazy to go find a... So far, all these screws have been loose, so you can't get to that guy. I guess we're gonna have to loosen it from the body first. So it looks like there's 1, 2 screws there, 2 screws there that hold this vacuum pot on. I'm probably wrong. It's probably more than that, but we're just gonna say it's 2 for now. And one thing I'll do when I get these out, I'll go ahead and put the screws back in the hole they came out of. That way I remember where they go. And that's the easiest way, by far, to remember where your screws went. That is a really long screw. Holy cow. Used to be a little C-clip down here to hold this guy on, but looks like it was lost long ago. Okay, it's also seized onto the shaft, so that's nice. The only thing I don't have to rebuild this is the vacuum pod thing for it. So hopefully it's not torn and ripped. Again, all these screws are just loose, or barely tight anyway. That tag's really cool. It's really neat that it stayed with it all this time. Wow, another really long screw. Definitely won't mix those screws up. Those things are really long. And here's the screw that we didn't see earlier. This dude right there. So we're going to take him out, and then the vacuum pod. We're just going to continue the violence, I guess. I don't know why it doesn't want to come off. I don't want to bend it, obviously. That would be no bueno. Come on now, you. There we go. No way. So one way you can test these guys is see if they work or not. So the vacuum signal here is here. That's the vacuum signal from the manifold vacuum. And as it sucks on it, it pulls this down, which opens secondaries, okay? So one thing to test them, you push that down, put your finger over that, and if it stays, the vacuum leaks, and you can let it go. Check that out. That is amazing. We'll still take it out and check it out, which may be a bad idea, but I'm curious to see what it looks like, because that is really cool. So that would have worked just fine. Secondaries would have opened. I just gotta hope this thing isn't so brittle that it doesn't fall apart in my hand. This is our choke cable bracket there, so your choke cable would run to that. Because this was a mechanical choke carburetor, apparently. I'm always scared of the best way to take these apart. I don't want to just go jam my screwdriver in between to split it apart. I don't know if we can push on it this way. No. Like I say, this has been on since the last dinosaur age, so. Okay, we're going to resort to prying on it, which is my least favorite method of doing this. Oh, goodness. Well, that worked really well. Didn't even booger anything. Wow. It's not even that bad. I mean, that... You can feel it. You can hear it, hopefully. I mean, that really is not bad at all. Now we just gotta make sure we don't tear it, but we're gonna take it out here and just check it over good and get rid of the giant spider webs underneath it. Oh man, how many brown recluses are living in here? Here's the vacuum secondary spring. So this resists the pull of vacuum and keeps the makes the secondaries open quicker. And you can have a stiffer spring, which makes the secondaries open later. So just depending on how you want it to work and how your engine is tuned. So that is a very nice thing about vacuum secondaries. You can easily tune the secondaries out on them. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at this throttle shaft, and I want to show you here. So this is the primary throttle shaft. These are known to have play in them whenever they're wore out. And it's hard to show on camera, but hopefully you can see that there, that movement there. This is a steel shaft and an aluminum base, and basically the steel is harder than aluminum, and so it wears out over time. So, but I have a bushing kit, we can ream this hole out and put a bronze bushing in there, price of bronze bushing in there. And it'll be brand new, just like I did on my 800 over there, and that worked really, really well. Last thing before we'll call it a night, I want to go ahead and take a Phillips screwdriver and pop this base plate out. This can be a scary part of a Holley carburetor. These are the screws that usually are stuck more than anything. I've had one snap off before on me, I had to drill it out, and that was not a fun procedure. So, we're going to go ahead and attempt to get these out. Hopefully they come right out. One good thing to do is always make sure you have an appropriately sized Phillips screwdriver to fit these, that way you don't strip them out, because they will if they are seized in there. Good. This guy came right out, that's excellent. Let's hope the rest of them come out as easy as that guy. Let's go. We're really lucky today, guys. I probably just jinxed it. This last one's gonna bite me in the butt. Oh, whew. Look at that, they all came loose. That's insane. And since they do seize up, I like to put a little bit of I usually use wheel bearing grease or some kind of grease on my manifold gasket, but usually I'll go ahead and put a little grease on the head of the bolt, that way it doesn't rust or corrode. So it would appear to me that everything else is detached from this base plate, so this should come off. Here, we can get right under here maybe. Tie up on it. There we go. Okay. No wonder why those wouldn't open. So here's our base plate. Alright guys, that's the carburetor part. I'm going to call it for the night. I forgot to mention when taking it apart that you need to take out your accelerator pump nozzle. And I noticed this one was modified with one of those that have the longer bronze legs, which is interesting. I don't know if that's factory or not, but it is pretty neat. I also want to make it known that this needle here sits underneath that nozzle. And if you take the nozzle out and you tip it upside down, this needle is going to fall out. So you need to make sure that you take that nozzle, this needle out, or at least know where you're doing with it. Because if you don't put that in there, it's going to siphon fuel out of that accelerator pump nozzle, and you're not going to know why. So that needle is very important. Don't lose it. It goes underneath the accelerator pump nozzle, underneath that screw and head, which I'll take out right now to show you. Basically, you should take you a flathead screwdriver. Come on. loosen that screw. There we go. Take you some needle nose or something. Take it out. And there'll be a gasket attached to it. It'll either be attached to this side or that side probably, or it'll fall out. But you're gonna want to replace that. So underneath that nozzle, in that hole is where that needle sits, and it sits up against that seat, and just the weight of the needle shuts off the fuel from siphoning out of the bowl and out of the accelerator pump diaphragm. I have a little more work to do when it comes to cleaning. My secondary throttle plates are stuck, so I need to work on that, and I'll work on getting those unseized right now. The last thing you want to do is start banging on them. Do not bang on them. If you want to, take the screws out and then take the throttle shaft out if you can. That would be the ideal way to do it. And I'll show you how that's done. All right, guys, working back on the carburetor here. We're going to take a flathead screwdriver, preferably a nice and wide one. And this throttle shaft is seized. It will not move. So I'm going to start with taking the blades out. And these screws are like smashed on the end, so they can't come out. So these always come out really hard. Maybe I should do something different about that, but this is the way I've done it in the past. Broke right free. I've had them soaking in PB Blaster, so sweet. Yeah, they will come out hard. Don't worry, you're not going to damage the threads. It'll still be okay. I would recommend, sweet, whenever you are done with them, to take a punch and smash the end of the screw again so it doesn't come out, because you don't want your screws falling in your intake. All right, I got the throttle blades out, and now the shaft moves, but it's not very good. It seems to move very freely, and it's just a little sticky. See this one? That's what you want, yeah, right there. But this one does not move that freely. So we're going to take the Phillips screw out of the end of that, and then there's a cotter key on this armature right here. So we'll go and take that out and screw out, and then we can slide the shaft right out. So let's get to it. All right, so I got the pin out of there. I got the Phillips screw out of this end. So now this guy push out of the hole there, and the whole shaft will slide out. I'm gonna need 2 hands for this. I'll show you guys when I'm done. I had to do a couple little taps on the throttle shaft with a hammer and a screwdriver to get it to come out, but it come right out. After just a couple light taps on it, and it just came right out. But it had these nylon throttle shaft seals on it. So make sure you remember which one those go in. The larger ones obviously fit on the larger ones, and the skinny ones in the middle. But overall, this throttle shaft seems to be pretty good. I'm going to clean everything out really well. I'm probably going to go ahead and take the primary throttle shaft out. That way we can clean it really well, and I'll show you guys how to put that back together. So let's get to it. Basically, it's the same deal on this side, except you have your choke armature thing on this side. So you take your Phillips screwdriver, knock that out, flap, and then take those out, and the whole shaft will just slide right out. I'm gonna go ahead and take this accelerator pump arm off, simply because I like to just stick it on the wire wheel to clean it up good. And yep, just working on cleaning everything up using simple green Scotch-Brite and a wire brush. So I'm not using any fancy Kim Dip carburetor cleaner stuff, because well, that stuff probably works really well and that'd be nice. I cannot afford it, so we're gonna just be doing this with the stuff we have laying around. I got this arm all cleaned up. I'm gonna go ahead and hit it with a coat of clear, because this is a steel arm, and as soon as water touches it, it will rust. And this is gonna look really ugly on whoever ends up using this carburetor. So we're gonna go ahead and just shoot some clear on it. It may not last forever, but hopefully it'll last for at least some amount of time. All right, guys, got her all cleaned up pretty well. Get ready to slide the throttle shaft back in. As you can see, without those seals, it's got a ton of play in it. So we obviously need to be putting those back in. They're not too challenging to do. You need both hands, so I'm gonna put you guys down while I do this. You're gonna basically be taking these, wrap it around that edge, and sticking it in the hole, essentially. So it's not too complicated. Just make sure you have the correct one on the right end, you know. So there's your adjustable secondary stop screw, and that's gonna be the side that has this hole on it. And your actual linkage will be on the other side where the spring screw is for the transfer slot adjustment. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and get this in there then. I'll catch you guys when I'm done. All right, guys, just wrapped up secondary throttle shafts. I'm not gonna lie to you, the plastic bushing things were really hard to get in, there is no slop in the throttle shaft now. It feels really good going back and forth, so very happy with it. Alright, so I just slid the primary throttle shaft back in. I made sure that this spring is hooked on this hook, okay? That's the return spring. And the other hook goes through this hole right there, and that is the return spring. Your accelerator pump cam is also screwed onto this. I did not remove this one. Sometimes they're worn out from use because they are nylon. They are a wear item. But this one seemed to be okay, so I did not replace it. So I'm gonna go ahead and screw the throttle blades back on and get those good and snug. This needle and seat was stuck in the bowl. So I'm gonna show you guys what I did. I took the nut, adjuster nut out of it, stuck it in the vise. Don't clamp down on it hard, just enough for the nut to stay in there. Those are very fragile nuts. And then you can just, I've already started it and it's broke free now, but you just push up against there as much as you can without moving the nut, and then you can twist the bowl and twist the needle and seat out of there, and it's working really well. I'm really glad it came out because it was very stuck in there and I was very worried. So that's how you do that, I guess. Alright guys, I'm going to go show you how to take apart one of these fuel bowls. So, step one, we're going to take out our needle and seat assembly. And to do that, we're going to use one of the adjuster nuts here that are on top of it. And you're going to just want to make sure the gasket's off of it. So the gasket on there, you're not really going to get a good bite on that particularly, especially if it's seized in there or stuck. So this one is a little stuck. The other one was stuck as well. So let me get a pliers on there and we'll try again. Alright, give that a couple turns with the pliers, and especially if it's an older carburetor, these are going to be in there pretty tight. If it's a newer carburetor, you probably don't have to worry about that as much, but there's a rubber O-ring in here that likes to lose its rubberness. So this is your needle and seat assembly. If this rubber O-ring here looks bad, then check it out because it's no good. I would highly recommend replacing that, and I'm going to have to get some because I do not have any needle and seats on hand. I need one for the primaries and secondaries on this here carburetor. So I'll have to get me some of those, but both of these are very bad. Next step, we're going to take off the accelerator pump diaphragm. Alright, so I got these screws out here. We're going to want to finish taking them out, set them to the side. I don't know which one's which, but typically it'll be the four of them that look the same. I would not recommend prying on this lever because you can bend the lever and then the lever will be out of adjustment, but so I'd recommend trying to get a screwdriver or something under the housing itself, or just giving her a good 1-4 here. So just hit it once with a screwdriver really and it popped right off. So, but these do get, turn into cardboard. Should be very rubbery. So get that guy cleaned off here, and I'll show you guys what's underneath it. All right, just peel the accelerator pump diaphragm back, even though it should just come off. But okay, there we go. So that one is shot, so you can throw that away. Here's a spring, and then on these older Holleys, they have a check ball instead of one of those rubber diaphragm mushroom things. I much prefer the check ball because it's not rubber. Basically, that's it. Make sure you keep this in mind. Your accelerator pump diaphragm will not return if you don't have that spring. So make sure you know where that guy is. And then you also, one thing that you might notice on a Holley, if for whatever reason you suddenly have no accelerator pump, the first thing to check, pop that guy off there and make sure that the check ball is retained by that bronze thing there. And then you're going to want to just make sure that the seat on that check ball is good and clear. So take your carb cleaner, poke it into the hole, and close your eyeballs. You just want to make sure there's no dirt in there, because if there's dirt on that seat, the check ball will not shut the fuel off, and every time that you try to use the accelerator pump, it's going to shoot it back into the bowl rather than being a one-way check ball, which is what it's supposed to be. So, as soon as you squirt fuel out of this hole here to the accelerator pump, the fuel level will drop. The check ball will fall out of suspension essentially, and it will let fuel in until the fuel rises enough that the check ball shuts off in the bowl. And then as soon as you actuate the arm, it shoots out this. Pressure in here increases anyway, which farther shuts the check ball against the seat. If you have to take these off, or if it just happens to be off, then you'll have to put it back in here, take you a very small screwdriver or something and a hammer, and punch the corners of these, and it'll smash the bronze out, and it'll do its job and keep the ball in there. But sometimes they like to fall out. Now that our needle and seat assembly is out, we're going to take those 2 Phillips screws out, and we can take our float out. So let's loosen those up. So take those screws out that were in those holes, and the entire float assembly will come out this way. Now be careful, there's a spring in here that needs to stay there, and it can come off. You should probably test these to make sure they float. You can do that if you want. I probably won't, but I'll probably regret it too, so you never know. Next step is take out that Phillips screw, take this armature off, then you're going to want to take the screw out, and take that guy out. Alright, so back that guy out, back that guy out. This guy here is a 1-inch wrench on this to take that off of the bowl. So we'll go ahead and get that all taken care of. Then you'll take your cheap Chinesium asbestos metering block gasket and bowl gasket and stick it on. It's very important to make sure the alignment dowels and all the passages line up. Otherwise, the fuel will flow in an incorrect pattern. It's always worthwhile to check to make sure all the holes line up. Alright guys, I'm to this point in the build. I got this whole section all buttoned up and ready to go. Now I'm going to work on the linkages in here. So let's work on that. So one important thing on your vacuum pot thing here, you need this here cork gasket, and he goes, he goes in here. He goes right there whenever you put it on. So that's a new unit I didn't use before. I put a new O-ring on my needle and seat, and I'll show you guys more what we're doing for the primary side as far as assembling a bowl. So this is how this goes here. Goes like that. Goes like that, and then the cork gasket goes the top corner. That's the hole for vacuum. So that's the hole you want your cork gasket to line up with. And then obviously you'd hook up your linkage here for your secondaries to that dude right there. So this is the old vacuum pot, and it's worth it to mention that we need to make sure you have our holes lined up for this guy. So obviously it works off vacuum, and if it doesn't line up properly and doesn't seal, it's not going to work. So this here hole, that's the vacuum hole, and this is the vacuum hole for the gasket. There's screw holes line up as well. So this is the old one. I would highly recommend replacing this, but I'm not going to this time because we're on a severe budget for this carburetor rebuild. So be sure you put the spring on here whenever you're putting the cap on, and then screw it down. If your plunger does not come back out, then you've neglected to use the spring. Cover up the vacuum hole, it should stay. So, diaphragm's good, spring's good. Now we just gotta screw her on there and attach the rod there. So there's 1, 2, 3 screws to hold that on. So, and then don't forget your cork gasket goes in that hole. I like to take a dab of grease and stick them on the cork gasket, or any gasket that needs to stay in a certain place. And that way, when I put it over the hole, it will stay. And then the excess grease will wash away, or be sucked away as soon as things start happening. It shouldn't interfere with anything. But don't just use a whole bunch either. So get those 3 screws snug down there, and then make sure this arm is on that guy right there. And there should be a tiny little C-clip that hopefully I didn't lose. That holds that little guy on there, but you know, the odds of me not losing it are pretty slim. Anyway, I'm gonna move on to this choke assemblage thing, my bobber. Yep. It's also worth it to mention that I forgot to put this on there, so take those screws back out, put this holds your choke cable on. Let's assemble this float bowl. First thing we're gonna start with is the fuel inlet fitting here. Okay, so this is the fitting here. This is one of our old one. You're going to want to take you one of these steel crush shim washers, because that's how it seals the gas in the bowl. And we'll put it on the right side. Might be marginally helpful. Also, it's probably not good that it's super rusty in there. Hopefully that doesn't like end up bad for us, which it probably will, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. I probably should try and get some more of that out. One thing that would be marginally helpful is if you put the inlet fitting on the correct side. So in our case, we did not. This is supposed to go on the other side. So let's flip that around, and then we'll put this one here on this side. And this is our actual inlet from the fuel pump, because it's got our bigger line here. So now this one, you may not have to deal with this on your guys' Holleys, because this is just a Ford unit and it's got, fuel lines, hard lines instead of nipples. But anyway, we'll go ahead and flip those around, and I'll catch you back here. So I take it as a sign that I should probably clean out the inside. So I did clean out the inside a little better. Whenever you tighten these things down, you don't want to, yank on them with all your might. Just get them nice and snug. That way they seal good. But don't crank on forever, never. So the inlets are good to go. Let's work on getting the float in here. To get the float in here, we're just going to take in this assembly here. Make sure this rod is there. Make sure the spring is still in there. That way it's got some spring pressure to help bring the float back up. It's going to go in this hole here. And those two holes top line up there. And take your screws, screw them in. Stick that in there. Take your flat screwdriver. Run her down. Just started at least. So, either way, you get the idea, okay? Float, 2 screws. Super simple. Now you're going to go ahead and get your sight plug in there. So, go ahead and... This one's a little bit crusty, but tighten that down. Again, don't crank on it with all your might. Also, make sure that the red washer is underneath it to seal it, otherwise it will leak. Alright, now we're going to install the bowl vent. Again, most of your newer Holleys don't even have this, but this was a usual thing on the older Fords, and it was simply to relieve the vapors that would accumulate inside the bowl. What happened is hot fuel was sitting here, it would start to boil, create vapors, create pressure inside here, and that way whenever it was, and this usually only happened on idle, whenever there was no airflow, right? As you can see with it screwed on, now it wants to remain closed, which will keep the fuel vapors inside, but as soon as the throttle comes back, hits it, it opens up, and will let the pressure escape, essentially, in the fuel vapors. It will cause fuel staining on top of your bowl of your carbs, so that's one place people don't like it as much. But I think it's a pretty ingenious invention to solve a pretty common problem. So next we're going to drop our used needle and seat with our new O-ring on it. And that's going to go in this hole here. And we're going to thread that guy in there. Now I need to make, because I'm so budget minded in this build, we're going to be making our own gaskets. I'll show you guys how that is. Basically, we're going to be recreating that, but with new gasket material. So basically, you can make 2 of these, or 4 total for each needle and seat. I already made them for this side. So this is gasket material. It's basically like cardboard, papery stuff, basically. And I just take me some scissors, and I'm trying to recreate this gasket right here, this little circle do guy. Mine aren't quite as pretty. Let's see where to go. As, a new one would be. Okay, just made me some new gaskets. Made new gaskets out of gasket material and scissors. Anyway, got that guy there. And so yeah, needle and seat, gasket, adjuster nut, gasket, hold down screw. Okay, but first we're going to adjust this needle and seat. As I was saying, okay, upside down, okay, hold it upside down. Turn the adjuster nut right here, okay. And then keep turning it. Until, so now we finally are getting somewhere here. So you can see there's space. And basically, you want to turn it until it has an even space. But another good thing to show you guys here, which I should have just left this sight plug out, but I'll show you anyway here. So basically, you just want to see if that's level or not. It's kind of something you're just going to have to learn to eyeball, but it's basically that. That is a pretty good float height to start with. The correct way to do this would be to, while the engine's running, pull this sight plug out, and if the fuel just trickles out, then you're perfect. But if it's pouring out, bad. If it's not coming out at all, bad. But if it's just trickling out, then that is perfect. But this is close enough to where it'll start and run just fine. And I've honestly never had to adjust my floats that way. So this 9 times out of 10 will work just fine. So that's what I would adjust your floats to. I'm also going to use grease on these gaskets as well, and that way they last forever. So now that your needle and seat is adjusted, you're going to take your 5/8 wrench to hold the adjuster nut and then run the screw down until it's tight and snug. All right, that's good and snug. You can see our float adjustment is still pretty good there, so we should be good to go. Next thing we're going to install is the accelerator pump diaphragm. This is the old one. Very crunchy. Yep, not good. These are a couple new ones I have. I don't know if these are different sizes. There are different size ones of these, so make sure you pick the correct size. I'm pretty sure, yeah, I think all 3 of these are the same size. And you should make sure these are nice and pliable, and this one is, so should be good to go there. He just goes in there, like so. And then you want to put your spring there. Then you'll flip her upside down. Spring, diaphragm, that thingamabobber. All right, this guy's put together pretty well. Got this nice and snug down. See, our diaphragm is working properly. All right, getting down to the nitty gritty here. We have the last metering block here, and you'll assemble the other one that's in there the exact same way, except it does not have a power valve in that one. The specific unit doesn't have a power valve in that one. But get your jets in here, snug down. Take you a power valve, which this is the old one and the old gasket, but same concept. You definitely want to replace your power valve. Hear how that sounds? You shouldn't hear anything whenever you push that in there. So you always want to replace your power valve, and then also always replace your power valve gasket there. So that seals in, and it goes just like that. Okay, don't put it in this way. That would be dumb. If you put it in this way, it's not going to work. Okay, not going to work. This diaphragm needs to be exposed to vacuum, and it seals against those windows. So fuel is let in this direction. Well, take that back. Fuel is let in to this side here, through this spring and through that, almost like a needle and seat there. So as soon as the engine starts running, vacuum pulls that and closes it. See that? Close, shut off, no fuel. But as soon as the vacuum gets low enough, it opens, lets fuel into these windows here, into these holes, and up through the main idle circuit right here. That hole is connected to that hole right there. Air blades down to up here to your boosters. So this just enriches the circuit by about 10 points at a certain vacuum level. So this here is a 6.5. That is what the list number calls for on Holley's website. So you'd replace this with a 6.5 power valve on this particular model. Most of them are like that, but obviously you can tune this, one of the tuning abilities of a Holley. But this should be a 6.5. So you're going to replace it with a 6.5. That means at 6.5 inches of mercury, this power valve will open and enrichen the main circuit by 10-ish jet sizes. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a new one and a new gasket, and we will screw that in there. Again, you're going to use your 1-inch wrench, and you just want to snug it down. Don't go cranking on it. All right, got that power valve installed. New gasket, and see, he's pretty happy in there. So it's a 6.5 again. So sometimes it'll say on the side like that one does, or right there, or on the front they'll say it. So all right, next step is to put it on. So what you're gonna want to do is grab your gasket that you got from Amazon because you're a cheapskate. Make sure all the holes line up, which I've checked this one does already. But more importantly than anything, you could be tempted to use a gasket like this one, which is missing this notch right here. But you need this hole right here to seal, because this is your accelerator pump jet. So out of the bowl, okay, when you activate the throttle, this lever goes down, squeezes fuel out of this diaphragm, out this little hole here, through this hole here, and up this feed line, through this hole here, and then finally up through that hole, which then goes through this and out those two holes. So there is a ton of sealing surfaces for a Holley accelerator pump. So you need to make sure that you use a proper gasket. This one is wrong, this one is right. And Holley made this pretty easy for you. There's only one way you can install one of these gaskets, because there's 2 alignment pins. On every Holley I've seen, they have them like that anyway. So this is the correct way to put it on. Both pins line up, all the holes line up. But as you can see, you cannot put it on this way. That hole lines up, this one doesn't. So that's very nice of Holley for you to include that. So these are your idle wells, air blades, accelerator pump. Those are the main holes. This hole down here, oh yeah, this is your manifold vacuum right there. Or sorry, your ported vacuum port. So it comes up through here, to there. So, pretty neat. Then take it up. The alignment pins, once again, will help you. And you'll stick her on there, and it won't stay. But then you're gonna want to take your fuel bowl, flip over your metering block. This is where it can get a little tricky while installing this, but it's not terrible. Again, this is your fuel bowl gasket here. This goes on this side of the metering block, and it seals your bowl to the block here. And there's, again, alignment dowels everywhere. So, and some of these don't fit better, some of these don't fit as good as others. This one takes a little bit of massaging onto all the holes, but once they're on there, it fits good. Make sure, again, that this hole is not plugged. You can see it's got a good opening there. Sometimes I've had to attempt to trim that out if it's a little offset. Just depends on the quality of the gasket. This one seems to be pretty nice, so didn't have any problems there. So take that, set her on there, and then you can take that with your other screws and screw them on there. Which comes down to some of the last gaskets we're gonna need. Typically, your Holley rebuild kits will come with these type of gaskets right here. Okay, these are your bowl screw gaskets, and they're made of paper or, you know, gasket material, that kind of stuff. However, recently I have these nylon. No, really from a terrible box to use for it. These nylon reusable bowl screw gaskets, and they work phenomenally well. So I would highly recommend using these. You reuse them over and over and over again, and not have to worry about them leaking. They always seem to seal somehow. Watch them not this time, but I've had very good luck in the past with them, even on old Holley bowls and screws. So go ahead and stick one each of the 4 screws, and then you can put your bowl on and your screws. This really isn't too far off from being the hardest part of rebuilding a Holley. So you have to make sure that your bowl is lined up with your metering block, the screws line up with the holes in the body. This thing has to be on this side of the throttle blade, so you almost need to have the throttles this way. And then you need to make sure your arm here, which would usually be right here, is on this side of the throttle blade, riding on the nylon lobe there. And this arm needs to be below this hole, where there should be that adjuster spring, which we'll put in right now. But you have to make sure all of this is lined up perfectly, or else it's not going to work. If you took this spring and screw assembly off while you were cleaning it, make sure that the Phillips part is on top and the nut part is on the bottom. Otherwise, it's going to be hard to adjust. Let's show you guys how to adjust it. You're going to use your 3/8 wrench and hold the bottom while using a Phillips to hold the top. And you're going to screw this tight until it is just barely touching this arm whenever it's at full droop, essentially. You also want to make sure you dial this in after you set your idle speed. So, you know, you're probably going to have to do this again while it's on the car. You don't want the adjustment preloaded a whole bunch so you don't lose your total volume of your diaphragm, but you want it to move as soon as you move the lever. As soon as you move the throttle, you want that to move. So right there is almost perfectly the sweet spot. Again, we're going to have to adjust that once it's on the car and we dial in our idle speed. But anyway, that is pretty darn close to being perfect, if not perfect. Also, make sure you put your C-clip on to hold the rocker arm on. You don't want this falling off while you're going on the road. That would kind of suck. Last, but certainly not least, we have to install our accelerator pump nozzle. Now, I've already greased the gasket for it, and it's really helpful to grease this gasket in particular because it sticks onto the bottom of the nozzle whenever you're trying to put it in there. Because as you can see, it's really hard to get it in that hole. Also, important to note, this needle goes in that hole as well. And this needle, all it does is seal fuel from coming up and siphoning out of the nozzle. That way, whenever there's air rushing past it, it doesn't create a low pressure below those nozzle tips and then siphon fuel out. This weight of this needle is enough to resist the siphoning effect. So all we gotta do is drop that needle down in there first, then drop this guy down in there and tighten her down. This is a really hard thing to do. You have to get it in that hole right there. It's honestly easier if you can take your choke out, but that's not usually doable. So this one is actually screwed in, which I might take the screws out if I can't get it, but a lot of times they're just riveted in or just a part of it in general. So I'm gonna do it the way I usually do it and just stick it in there, and you're gonna use the pair of needle nose pliers to get it down there, and it usually works pretty well every time. All right, again, there's our little accelerator pump nozzle. You're just gonna drop it in there with a pair of needle nose, set it on there, and then you can take your file screwdriver and snug her down. Again, make sure you have a gasket under there and make sure you have the needle pointing down whenever you stick it in there. I got this other shaft thing on too. I need to get a new cotter pin for that little guy there, but that was pretty much the last part. One thing we gotta put on is the choke thing, which chokes are for wimps, so real men don't need chokes. Basically, there's a spring and a screw and a cam, and it's finicky and weird, and I don't like it. I don't like it, so. And me not liking it is enough to not mess with it, so no, I'm kidding. I'll show you guys tomorrow. I'm tired. Today, we're gonna finish up that carburetor. It's a beautiful day out here. Time to get some work done. I forgot to show it off camera, but we got the fuel line on. It went on this side. A lot of your other Holley 600s are just gonna have a transfer tube on this side, and you won't have to worry about an external fuel line like this, but on this one, that is how it is. I also did not show putting the choke on very well. Here's a video of what it looks like. I'm really not very good at the chokes. You have to align the spring right on the bottom and on the top, and then back that screw all the way out so it doesn't touch the cam. But I've had several, I've only ever really had one Holley, but I don't use a choke on it, and I've never had any particular problem without using a choke. So just get it tuned in right. If you're into using chokes, go ahead and do that. There's other videos, I'm sure, on how to properly set one up, because I honestly don't know how. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys the base settings you need to set your carburetor to, so that way whenever you stick it on your car, it will run. So on your idle mixture screws on this side, on these here, you're gonna turn them out 2 turns. So you're gonna start by turning them in until they seat. So that's seated right there. So you don't want to go cranking on it. As soon as it stops, you'll know it stops. Right there, it stopped, and we're going to back it out. 1, 2 turns. It doesn't have to be exact, and that'll probably be a little rich. You're gonna have to stick a vacuum gauge on it or something. or if you have an AFR gauge, you can use that as well. But you're gonna wanna do that 2-turn thing on both sides. It's important to keep these the same. You want the same air-fuel ratio side to side. I'd highly recommend running a 1-inch spacer under these as well, especially if you have a regular dual plane intake. It's gonna help with a little more plenum volume. So that's seated. 1, 2. Okay, 2 turns there. Now I'm going to show you guys what to look for when setting up your transfer slot. That way it'll actually idle. Basically, you want to set your transfer slot to a square. So you can see that's basically a square. Your transfer slot is that little itty bitty little slot right there. You want to set that to a square. If you want to set it a little bigger, it's not going to hurt, especially if you're just trying to get it running to start with. If you want to set it up a little bit higher, it's not going to hurt. It will run. But whenever you get it running, go ahead and stick a vacuum gauge on your ported vacuum, which on this carburetor, it's right here. And you're going to set, well, tell you what, I have a whole video on setting up your transfer slots with a vacuum gauge. So why don't you just check that video out? I'll put it in the description below. But essentially, you're going to set this just till the onset of vacuum in ported vacuum, and then back it down just a little bit. So as soon as you open this, you want to see ported vacuum at this. But on idle, you want to see no vacuum. Anyway guys, that's all you need to know to set up your Holley so that it will run. As long as you've done all the other steps correctly, it should run. I'd originally intended on selling it, but I think instead I'm going to keep it, and we're going to put a 4-barrel intake on the yellow truck here, and we're going to put that carburetor on there. I think that 600 CFM vacuum secondary would be a really good carburetor for the truck here. So that's what we're going to do instead. If you want to sell the carburetor, all you'd have to do is make a listing on Marketplace for it and sell it that way, or bring it to your local swap meet or whatever to sell it. I was going to charge a little over $200 for this one probably, because it is in really pretty nice shape. I was going to test fire it on the Torino first to make sure everything worked properly on it and didn't leak or anything, but that's about how much I was going to charge for this one. This one's a little bit rare because it actually has a Ford part number on the choke horn, and all the parts match, so it's like a numbers matching carb, for whatever that's worth. If you have any questions about Holley carburetors, put in the comment section below. I've learned a lot about them. I won't say I know everything, obviously, but I do know quite a bit about them. And there definitely was more we could have done with this one, and maybe we will have problems with it when I actually store it on the truck and we find out if it works or not. Based on everything I've seen so far, I think it'll be a good carburetor for us. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time on It'll Run, where I'll be working on this truck right here.